With the 9th overall pick, the Vancouver Canucks select, from the London Knights of the OHL, Bo Horvat. That was the last time we selected 9th, and man, what a great decision that was. I think in hindsight, Corey Schneider and the way he was traded 1-for-1 for that 9th overall pick could have been seen as a little bit of an underpayment, especially with the fact that the Oilers apparently were offering so much more for Corey Schneider, but because Mike Gillis didn't want to trade with a division rival, he didn't make that trade and send him to New Jersey instead for less. But either way, Bo Horvat is here as a 9th overall pick. He is now the captain of the squad, and the Vancouver Canucks in the 2021 NHL Entry Draft 8 years later. My gosh, Horvat was drafted 8 years ago. That feels so weird. We have ourselves the 9th overall pick once again. Thank you to those in the previous Vancouver Canucks video who commented Sebastian Aho. If you want a chance to be featured in the next Canucks video, then hey, stick around to the end of this one. The Vancouver Canucks have the 9th overall pick in this year's NHL Entry Draft. Who are they going to draft? Who do you want them to draft? And who do I personally think they should go ahead and get? It's one of the most common questions asked out there for Vancouver Canucks fans and Vancouver Canucks overall media discussion, so I'm going to go ahead and nip this in the bud right here 1 month before the entire gosh darn entry draft comes and goes, and give you my thoughts as to what I think the Vancouver Canucks could do, what I personally value in this draft, and in turn, how exactly that corresponds to my favorite hockey team, the Vancouver Canucks. Yeah, I know, my favorite team is not Montreal, guys. It's kind of weird. But yeah, I think most of you already know I'm a Vancouver guy. I was born in the Philippines, but I moved to Vancouver when I was a baby, and I grew up here, and as a result, I love the Canucks, but ultimately the Canucks bring me so much pain every single year, so it's tough to digest it. But either way, we're talking today about the draft, and the Vancouver Canucks selecting at 9th is a pretty good spot, you know? Because when it comes to this year's draft, I've said it the entire time, when you compare this draft to the previous drafts that we have had, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2016, 2015, there isn't an Austin Matthews or a Connor McDavid or a Lafreniere in this year's draft. There isn't a number one guy who is definitively gonna go number one because he is just so above and beyond better than everybody else. Instead, you have about 6, 7, 8, 9 guys that you could realistically argue have assets that are more projectable and therefore more valuable to you and your scouting party, which would put them above other talent. That's not to say that this draft sucks and that everybody here is going to be a bust, but what you have is a whole bunch of Jake Sandersons and Lucas Raymonds and Jamie Drysdales, but no above and beyond number one guy. So, for this year's draft at 9th overall, the Vancouver Canucks are in a really great spot, because Jim Benning said it himself. There are 9 guys that the team likes, and with the way things are going, they will probably have somebody available to them that falls in line with their values. It's a similar thing that we had to 2018, for example, where the Vancouver Canucks had the 7th overall pick, and I said to myself, you know what, Dahlin, Svechnikov, Zadina, Hughes, Boqvist, Tkachuk, and Wahlstrom. These are 7 names right here, and because the Canucks have 7th overall, it mathematically means that one of these 7 names will be available. And because that's how it works out, whoever is remaining out of these 7, I want the Vancouver Canucks to draft at 7th overall. Luckily, we had more than one of those guys available, a few of them actually, and the Canucks ended up going with the guy that I had at 4th overall, Quinn Hughes, who is very good and who is in need of a contract right now, but that's a video for another day. The Vancouver Canucks at 9th are in a very similar spot, because I look at this draft and I say, man, Beniers, Power, Clarke, Hughes, Eklund, Wallstedt, Lysell, Guenther, Johnson, and McTavish. These guys are all great, and I like them for the most part, and I think that they all could become NHL players if everything goes right. We've made why I wants for every single one of those guys, by the way, so go ahead and check out those individual scouting reports if you want to hear my thoughts. But I listed 10 names right there, and mathematically, 2 of those names are going to be available when the Vancouver Canucks pick 9th overall in the 2021 draft, and that's not even including Simon Edvinsson, who is also supposed to be a top guy here. The Chaz Luciuses, who are honestly pretty underrated, and the Cole Sillingers and the Aatu as well. There are still other guys that could creep into that conversation, but when it comes to that top 10, I think the Vancouver Canucks have themselves an opportunity here to grab just whoever ends up falling. The 9th overall pick is great because you don't need to choose. You just need to take a look at who slipped through the cracks and be like, okay, there we go, Filip Zadina, he dropped to 6, let's take him. Okay, Quinn Hughes, he dropped to 7, let's take him. him. All right, Trevor Zegras is here at 9th overall. Let's take him then. You just take who is there, and you don't have to make any big decisions, and you don't have to do any what-ifs, because you're not picking Nolan Patrick 2nd overall, and then in 5 years everybody's saying, darn it, man, we got Nolan Patrick. What if we took Makar or Pettersson or Heiskanen instead? For Nick Suzuki at 13th, it's like, wow, we just took the guy that happened to be there. And the Vancouver Canucks are in a spot where I could definitely see one of Hughes, maybe Eklund, maybe Clarke, slipping down to 9. And if it's not one of those, then hey, you still have maybe a Guenther or maybe a Johnson available too. Everybody's been talking about that Kent Johnson-Elias Pettersson connection. If you have yourselves a Kent Johnson at 9th overall, honestly, I'm good. He's projected to go in that range anyway, and he's a guy that, at his best, could be a really solid power play winger to play alongside of the Petys and the Hugheses and the Brocks. He's not going to be a net front presence. Johnson could be that dangly, face-off circle area kind of guy who can really just take the pants off of the opponent, send it out in front for a good cross crease, and then they score points that way. Johnson could be a really good, creative, fun, high-skill guy to play on this squad. You have yourselves that Brandt Clarke, whose overall draft stock is pretty high. Some people have him at 2nd, 3rd overall, but again, this year's draft is so whack he could go down there to 6. If by some miracle he falls down to the Vancouver Canucks 9th overall spot, you automatically have yourselves a penciled-in number 1 right-side defenseman in the long-term future. Sure, he doesn't have the wheels like you would expect a top defenseman to have, but his edge work, his lateral mobility, his offensive creativity in the zone is so exquisite, and he creates passing lanes on a dime. He's a really good dynamic offensive defenseman, and if you have this kind of guy playing with a Quinn Hughes, boy, you have some really good potential there. Obviously, Luke Hughes is the one that everybody's always talking about too. Oh, the Hughes and the Hughes. Why would we take Luke Hughes? He's a left D. We don't need any more left D. If he's available at 9, you could make a realistic argument that he probably should be one of the better players still on the board. And when you're going for a draft pick and you're swinging on upside, Luke Hughes has a boatload of upside. And sure, he doesn't play like Quinn. They play different games, but Luke does indeed have a boatload of potential, so much to the point that some are ranking him in the top 3. So, if this kind of guy slips to 9, which is very well possible, I would not be opposed to taking him. Same with Simon Edvinsson, who has his flaws, who has the things that he needs to work out, but if you have a Simon Edvinsson playing with a Quinn Hughes, all Edvinsson needs to do is give Hughes the puck, and he'll be good. He can shut things down, let Quinn do his thing in the offensive zone. When it comes back the other way, Edvinsson can collapse inwards and take the puck away, send it back over to Quinn, and boom, it's back out. I know you're all in the comments, oh, he's a left-handed defenseman. Yeah, but he plays on the right side too, so he can be interchangeable in that kind of spot. According to Rumours, apparently the Vancouver Canucks really like Mason McTavish, but he's been on a really good tear ever since the U18s, so much so that NHL Central Scouting has him as their 2nd best skater in North America. He's been on the uprise, and as a result, I don't really know if McTavish is actually going to be available at 9, but he's a guy who could become a really solid 2nd-line caliber, game-breaking 3rd-line center kind of player. Not really 1st-line in my opinion. I don't know if McTavish's ceiling projects him to being that dominant. But if you have a center core in the future, Horvat as your 1C, Pettersson as your 2C, I only say that because that's usually how they're deployed. We all know at heart Pettersson is better than Horvat, but Horvat plays the number 1 center minutes. You have Horvat, you have Pettersson, and you have gosh darn freaking Mason McTavish on your 3rd line, giving an offensive boost and making things tough for the opponent. That could be really good. You want to talk about one more guy? Okay, let's talk about Eklund. He's in the thumbnail, I think, so we're going to have ourselves a conversation about him. Really strong hockey IQ, offensive awareness off the charts. He plays really well in the perimeter, and he's able to facilitate play by either sending the puck right through the slot or dangling his way through a few guys and then throwing it out for a pass. This is the kind of guy who, if you play him with an Elias Pettersson, you could have some really creative, Sedinary-like Henrik to Daniel kind of plays. Some people have Eklund as high as 2nd overall, some maybe even at number 1. But the way this draft is, I wouldn't be surprised if any of these guys slipped down and eventually just fell through the cracks at 9th. Whether it's Clarke or Eklund who slips to 9, or you're going at it and just saying, all right, Kent Johnson's right here, let's take him, man. Or maybe the Hughes guy, or maybe the Edvinsson guy slips around. You have yourselves a really good chance here to just take who slips. It's not like you need to make a tough decision here, because at 9th overall, a lot of the decision-making is going to be made for you, which is why I'm super stoked to see how exactly things are going to go at the 2021 NHL Entry Draft for my favorite team, the Vancouver Canucks. If you made it to the end of this video, comment in the comment section below, Corey Schneider, because 9th overall, Bo Horvat, Corey Schneider, Lou Lamorello, you know what I'm talking about here. Talk to me in the comments as well. What do you think about the Canucks and their draft pick? Who do you want them to take? I know this one's probably going to cultivate a bigger audience, so if you want an extended look on any of the prospects we talked about here, why I want on this YouTube channel is the series for you. Go ahead, see what I have to say about all the prospects in this range and more, because we're going to be talking about other guys that are drafted later than the top bunch. But I hope you enjoyed this special Rosen 99, and bye.